Open bodybuilding is dying.
If you are pushing the envelope full tilt in the open bodybuilding division, you would be lucky to make it past 45 years old.
So we're seeing a lot of heart attacks and stuff. And there's 50 pros that I know about
that have died.
What about amateurs? What about guys that never compete?
Bodybuilding has been around for over 140 years, starting with Eugene Sandow in the 1880s and evolving with larger, leaner and better physiques every millennia since then, going through a tremendous route of evolution which really caught fire after the 1975 documentary, which we all know and love, called Pumping Iron.
It's as satisfying to me as coming is.
Which really popularized bodybuilding on a larger scale. Today, the Mr. Olympia, which is like the Super Bowl of bodybuilding, is watched by millions worldwide, and bodybuilders like Chris Bumstead, Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler have become household names for most people who go to the gym. But over the last few years, we have been seeing a downward trend. Bodybuilders have been dying young at alarming rates, with new headlines coming out almost weekly about how a well-known bodybuilder or star in the gym and fitness community has died prematurely as a result of prolonged exposure to dangerous compounds. And with the inclusion of the more aesthetic and arguably healthier classic physique division getting the spotlight, not as many are watching the big guys anymore. So what is really going on with open bodybuilding? Well, what's happening right now is actually the result of something which has been going on for years. You see, during the 1960s and 70s, often referred to as the golden era of bodybuilding, the physiques were a lot smaller and generally had much higher body fat than the guys today. Actually, if you look at Lou Ferrigno during the 1975 Olympia, his body fat percentage on stage was probably higher than most professionals today during their off-season. But despite being less impressive, having that extra level of body fat meant that they were likely overall healthier, and they didn't have to get close to death in order to compete. They didn't have to diet as hard, and they certainly weren't pushing the levels of PEDs required to be competitive today, nor did they dehydrate themselves as much to get stage lean. But after all, just like any sport, with evolution comes the extremes. During the 80s and 90s, the guys started getting a lot leaner. We saw a lot more incentive for guys to come in at 4-5% body fat with striations all across their bodies. It started with guys like Rich Gaspari, Gary Stridham, Momo Benaziza, and further developed when guys like Andreas Munzer and Dorian Yates came into the scene. And this was also around the time bodybuilders started using other substances to gain the edge in competition. Anabolic steroids were bad enough on their own, and virtually everyone used them to varying degrees. But now guys started taking diuretics to flush water out of their systems. Some started using insulin to boost performance and anabolic signaling. And because guys were always trying to get bigger or leaner, many upped the dosages of what they had already been taking. Unfortunately, despite evolution in the way we train and eat for performance, the primary driver of evolution in bodybuilding was the rapid increase in the use of performance-enhancing drugs. And this was really the first time we started experiencing premature deaths amongst top-level bodybuilders. Momo Benaziza in 1992 at just 33 years old, right after a show. Andreas Munzer in 1996 at just 32, Eduardo Koach in 2006 at 47, and of course the very famous Mike Menzer, who died at just 49 from heart complications. But these guys would just be the very beginning of a serious trend in the following years. During the 90s and the reigns of Dorian Yates and Ronnie Coleman, size and conditioning were taken to a whole new level. Back then, bodybuilders looked somewhat aesthetic and healthy, but when people look at a modern bodybuilder today, they don't think, wow, I want to look like that. They think, how the hell is this guy even alive? Or how does he wipe his ass? The standards changed completely and slowly formed the bodybuilding world into what we have today. In 2025, open bodybuilders are massive, bigger than ever, at least in terms of width. Although very few would arguably beat the icons from the 90s and early 2000s, the average level of size and musculature have definitely increased, close to the point that it's not really possible for the guys today to get much bigger or leaner without suffering extreme long-term health consequences. And that's exactly what's been happening. Not only is open bodybuilding coming across as more dangerous than it ever has been, but people have also really taken a liking to these smaller and more appealing physiques. Of course, the guys in classic physique are massive and they take a lot of creatine as well, and are still way too big for the average person to find any appeal from. But they're at least more appealing than a guy who's close to 300 pounds and can barely breathe on stage. And many find them to be more realistic. Arnold Schwarzenegger himself has, after all, called out open bodybuilders in the past for having large midsections or not being able to perform the vacuum pose, where you pull your stomach in to display a smaller waist. And even though the guys now are arguably more aesthetic than the era before, they are still pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. it. So you could say that open bodybuilding has some sort of image problem that is only growing over time. Back in the day, people would say that nobody wants to watch these smaller guys if there's something bigger and better.
Nobody is concentrating on developing symmetry of proportion, shape, and definition anymore.
If you take a bunch of guys, like 20 guys that weigh 190 pounds, 200 pounds with beautiful symmetry, you're gonna get this.
But what if bigger isn't better? Back in the 90s and 2000s, you pretty much had to be a top-level professional bodybuilder to get any level of clout or fame, usually by winning top-level shows and getting displayed in magazines or posters. But today, with social media, influencers like Sam Sulek, David Lade, Jesse James West, Alex Eubank, etc. are all much more popular than the top-level bodybuilders in open. You don't have to be a freak anymore. Kids on TikTok who drink raw eggs and have a solid physique can easily get more fame than a top-level Olympian. Six-time classic physique Mr. Olympia, Chris Bumstead, is arguably the most popular bodybuilder in open times, with more than 25 million followers on Instagram alone. And even on social media, you can still see that all those massive physiques are getting bombarded with messages about health, or that they look disgusting, or that they're only big because they take more PEDs, which is kind of true, but it paints the picture that most people don't care that much about size anymore, or at least the majority of the gym community don't. And thus, a lot of the financial incentive of becoming a top-level bodybuilder also goes away. If you're not top 10 in the world, you don't make a lot from competing at all, and unless you just really love the sport, which I believe everyone in the top stage do, then there is no good reason for competing, especially if you could have less issues by simply going to classic. To become the very best, you have to sacrifice so much of your life, your health, and competing at the top level isn't exactly easy. It's one of the most mentally demanding sports out there with so little benefit that it's crazy. And yes, we see all these top-level bodybuilders succeeding, but there are also thousands of guys who spend years trying to just turn professional, and most never make it there, either because they don't have the genetics, they don't have the access to the best PEDs or coaches, and some just don't have the right tan.
Thank you, Greg.
So open bodybuilding is now getting matched by classic. People now realize how unhealthy and how dangerous the sport is. There is little incentive to actually compete or to turn pro, and it's really a super tough sport to be good at, especially if you don't have the genetic tools for it. And now you can go viral and become a sensation in the bodybuilding industry without even competing. Or you can compete in a different division while taking less drugs. So why do people even want to compete in open in the first place? I don't think I'm the right guy to answer this though, because the mindset and drive of an open level bodybuilder is likely very different from mine or that of most athletes. However, there is hope for open bodybuilding, because even though classic physique has stolen a lot of these spotlights, open bodybuilders are clearly more streamlined now than they used to be. Yes, you still have the absolute freaks like Nick Walker, but the top guys right now like Samson Dauda, Derek Lunsford and Hadi Choopan are all able to hit a vacuum pose. And yes, Samson is freaking huge, but they're not as big as the guys in the early to mid 2000s, or even compared to a recent Mr. O like Big Ramy. Still though, the changing appeal of people who go to the gym will still take a big toll on how we view open bodybuilding. And if classic starts taking over as the quote-unquote real bodybuilding, would anyone really be surprised? If we keep seeing more top-level bodybuilders die young, or if classic keeps growing, then I think that's a very realistic scenario, and open bodybuilding may be wiped off the map completely. But what do you guys think? Is open bodybuilding slowly dying, and will classic physique take over? And what can bodybuilding do to help with their current image problems, the deaths, and getting more people watching again? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Make sure you subscribe if you enjoy these sorts of videos. I try posting like these every single week, except for last week I was hospitalized. And if you want to join my training community for training plans, recipes, and information about how you can program for yourself, check out the top link in the description. And thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.